Hello, Dustin. I'm making a jackass out of myself by talking very loudly to my phone in a highly populated public place, but I'm doing so for the most good and pure of reasons, to make you very jealous. Now, Dustin, as you can tell, Lex and I are on a train currently headed towards Glasgow, so that we can see the LA noise punk band called Health, of whom I know you're a big fan. And Dustin, as you watch the scenic Scottish landscape slide past the window, keep this in mind. This is just the beginning. We have plenty of other awesome places we're gonna go that you wish you could be. Now, to be fair, Dustin, you can't really be mad at us because we are, like, sort of taking you with us virtually, so we're in George Square, which is the de facto city center of Glasgow, and it's named after King George III. Now, you're a military history buff, which is why you dress up in pretty little costumes and play war with your dad, which is adorable, by the way.
So
but you probably know who King George III is anyway.
and if you don't, you can Google it.
He's known for three things. First, for getting his ass kicked by America during the Revolutionary War. Second, for kicking Napoleon's ass at the Battle of Waterloo. Third, for having purple shit. And if that doesn't sound familiar to you, it's because
You didn't Google it.
he was famously crazy. He had a condition that was called porphyria. You should Google it. Part of what it does is it builds up things in your system that concentrate on your poo and your urine that make it really cool when you poo and pee. So that's fun. And even though this is called George Square and you'd expect there to be a statue of King George somewhere, there's not. Instead, there's this giant monument to Sir Walter Scott in the middle, which is kind of cool, but not nearly as cool as the one in Edinburgh. We're here at the Walter Scott Monument. As you can see, it's really, really tall, and I noticed that guy has a lot of poop on his face. Pigeons are assholes. So Lex had an interesting point. Glasgow's really cool. It's kind of like Denver. It really mixes the old and the new, and it has this feeling of being a city, but like kind of a laid-back, chill city. Anyway, so then Lex and I checked into our hotel, which took far longer than it should have, because apparently the guy lost our reservation, which sucks. Then we were wandering around the city, and we found somewhere that I think that you'd really like. And last time I checked, you worked for an Irish pub that specialized in selling high-quality whiskeys. And if I remember correctly, you fancy yourself a bit of a whiskey connoisseur. Well, as you know, the Scots are whiskey connoisseurs as well, and I found somewhere I think you'd really love. It's called the Pot Still. It's quite a lovely little pub, and as you can see behind me, they have over 700 different types of single malt whiskey, you know, just to make you jealous.
So I am drinking a 17-year peated Speyside that you've never heard of. Cheers.
Now we're heading over to the Stereo Bar to check the show out.
Fuck yeah.
And we're going to try to get a couple shots within the show, but I'm not sure if it's actually going to work out, so we'll see. All right, Dustin, so we made it to the show, and there's something that I think that you need to see.
Should have been here, dude.
I feel lovely.
Sweaty and satisfied.
It's usually a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if my ears work anymore.
What are you saying?
Honestly, for me, my favorite part was the percussion. I mean, the melodies were great and all, and at certain times they had like swells that made me feel like I was having emotions, which is a weird thing I don't like. But other times the percussion like reminded me of my punk rock roots. Like I felt like I was back at a punk rock show when I was like 15, 16 years old. And like I just wanted to eat mountains and like fart tornadoes. We're headed back to the hotel so we can get some rest. We've got adult things to do tomorrow. We're gonna go to a museum. So we woke up at 7:30 a.m. so I could take a shower and have a nice big breakfast before we decided to walk around Glasgow this morning, which seems really weird. Like, I don't know when I decided to become responsible. And we're gonna go in here, which is the Glasgow Gallery of Modern Art, which is pretty famous for having a monument out front with a traffic cone on its head. Alright, Dustin, so we spent over an hour walking around the gallery, and there were a lot of awesome works that we really, really loved. I think one of my personal favorites was an art installation by this guy named David Sherry.
Definitely one of my favorites as well.
And what was really, really cool about it is that it actually forced you to interact with the art itself. Like, there were these drawers that you had to open.
And he also had a great sense of humor and incorporated writing into the art.
Yeah, like he had all these poems and stuff like that, and there's these little books that you could open up with all sorts of good stuff. It was awesome. Another of my favorite things was there was this moped there, which, as you can see, had some sort of battery, and I don't know how it worked, but it created water as he was being driven during this race in Spain. And then the artist actually used the water that he made on his race to create a watercolor of something that I think looks a little familiar to everybody from New Mexico. Oh, and also there was this really cool, gigantic painting that was painted by this Aboriginal Australian and like 17 other artists. And it was basically just a green canvas that had a lot of little dots on it. The other thing that really struck me about GoMA, as it's known here, is the clashing of like the new and old. The building was very, very old, but then there was modern art all around it. Alright, so Dustin, these are the Glasgow Greens, which is basically like Central Park except for Glasgow. They actually have two of those. One is this, and the other is Kelvin Grove Park, which is also home to a huge museum that we don't have time to check out today, unfortunately. And check out this badass obelisk. I don't even know what it's for. Alright, and right behind me is one of the reasons that we actually wanted to come here. That thing's called the People's Palace, and attached to it, that big old conservatory there, it's called the Winter Gardens, and we're hoping to see some cool stuff in there. And if you want to see my thoughts on conservatories, then go look at my video from my friend Zach, link in the description. Here's something you don't often see in Scotland: fountains. Further proof that this place isn't as cold as everybody says. And the view from the inside. I mean, check this out. This is just cool. So we're finished up and we're going to be heading back to Stirling now. And it's been interesting since we've been walking around Glasgow. Our overall impression has kind of changed. You know, earlier in the video we said that it was a lot like Denver, and it really is, especially in the city center. But I think one of the most defining characteristics of this place is how certain things clash. Like when we were in GoMA, there was this huge clash between old and new. And then hanging out at Glasgow Greens, we were in the middle of this huge bustling city, this metropolis, with tons of old buildings. But standing in the middle of the park, or sitting in the winter gardens in that giant conservatory, we couldn't hear a single car or anything like that. And even the history of Glasgow has a lot of conflict in it as well. For centuries, this was one of the most bustling and busiest capitalist centers in the United Kingdom, and the busiest port on the island of Great Britain. And when you visit the city center, you can still see some of that. Or like where we're standing right now, which is Merchant City, it's being gentrified. And when you get to the outskirts of Glasgow, there's actually quite a lot of poverty. Admittedly, not as much as there used to be since the 1990s. There's been a huge cultural revolution, but it's still a big problem here. And there's still massive political conflict as well. George's Square, which you saw earlier, has been host to many riots. In fact, one that was a riot in opposition of a riot act, which I find hilarious. But one of the most interesting things about all this conflict is that it doesn't really seem unnatural. Like, all these different views have kind of come together in a really syncretic way that's blended to make the culture that is Glasgow. And it's just an awesome city. So anyway, Dustin, we're headed back to Stirling, but Lex and I are tired of walking, so we're gonna teleport.
We made it home!
Wasn't that faster?
It was!
Thanks for Glasgowing with us on our little trip.
Oh my god.
And just so you don't hate us, we actually did get you a little present, a little souvenir. Death Magic, it's their new album. But yeah, now that you have your passport, you definitely need to get your ass on a plane and get out here and come see us. We have a spare bedroom, so we expect you to use it soon.
Yes.
And we love you, brother. Thanks for hanging out. Don't forget, go look at every other video I've ever made. Share them with everybody you've ever met in your entire life, and force them to share it with at least 5 other people. And if you do that, I'll be internet famous in like 2 days or something. I don't know how that works. Help me out. Do it. Click share, which is over there, and then like, which is over there. So yeah, we'll talk to you soon, brother.
Toodles!
Say that again?
Downhill ever since.
We think it's still beautiful, though. I'd like to note that he also added that we should stay here for 2 weeks and see if our opinion changed, but whatever.